Are we live? We should, in theory, be live, although I can't see anything on the stream. Anyone in the chat? Knock, knock. Hello, hello.
Uh,
Can you see us? I don't see. I don't see anything at all on the YouTube studio. This
oh
is
no.
problematic. Oh no, it's loading. Uh, I think I think we're live. I think we are live. Oh, sick, perfect.
Oh,
So,
that's good.
yeah, fantastic. Hi, Ruby. Welcome to
Hi.
the deep dive live streams. How are you
Thank
doing
you so
today?
much for having me. Yeah, I'm doing well today. How are you doing, Ali?
Mate, I'm doing great. I was playing frisbee earlier with one of these. I don't know if you've played frisbee with these things before. They're so good.
Yes.
Oh, amazing.
Even though they're so dangerous with our dogs, because they just, they grab it in their mouth and it goes right round their head. So they end up, I think it's actually like a huge safety hazard for dogs, but
Oh dear.
there's something about them which is so much cooler than
Yeah, they
normal.
become asphyxiated with the frisbee. Yeah, but
Yeah.
when you get that perfect throw, it really makes you feel like an airbender or something. It's like, oh, smooth
Oh my
sailing.
gosh,
It's so good.
literally. Like ultimate frisbee.
Yeah, man. Anyway, for the viewers, we have 750 people so far.
Wait.
For the small segment of the audience who might not know who you are, can you give us a quick kind of intro to who you are, what you do, what's the vibe?
Yeah, of course. So my name's Ruby Granger on YouTube, and I've just finished my first year studying English literature at the University of Exeter. If you can't assume from the fact that I do an English literature degree, I am a massive bookworm. I love to read, and the content I make on YouTube is basically student lifestyle and study tip based, and some book bits thrown in there too.
That's a very good introduction, and of course we have all of the links and stuff in the video description. You guys should check out and subscribe to Ruby's channel. I'm sure you're already. The first thing I wanted to ask you is a very selfish question. So you are famous for being into the classics, and I have never really understood the classics, and I've tried vaguely. I've tried dabbling with them, but like I end up just reading like, paranormal romance or Harry Potter and repeat, or just like absolute trash. Um,
No,
yeah.
excuse me, that's not trash. That
Okay, Harry Potter and repeat isn't trash, but paranormal romance maybe. But what value do you find in reading kind of the classics, and what are your favorites of the classics? Like, what does the classics even mean? I really don't know what I'm talking about here.
Well, I mean, it's an interesting question, but I think first of all, just in the way that you framed it as kind of a dichotomy between classics and paranormal romance fiction and Harry Potter, like I think just that in itself is maybe not the best way of looking at it because in many ways it can serve a very similar purpose to what you get from reading other books, but I think the difference when you pick up something like Jane Eyre or Great Expectations isn't that it's not you're not expecting not to enjoy it. It's not like it still can provide that sense of escapism that all well that I read books like a lot of the time for escapism, and I do think that classics can still provide that, but it's just about it's more of a mindset thing when you go into reading a classic. I sometimes find you have to be in a different kind of mindset to when you go into reading something like Harry Potter. It's like establishing that you're reading something which is more dated. But I mean, I say that, but also so there is like actual value. I think very just in for enjoyment's sake, the classics are great books, and that's a large reason why I read them. But the other thing which I think is fascinating about the classics canonically, the books that English teachers will put on their
Yeah.
reading list, like all the Shakespeare plays, and um, I think there's so much to be said for reading something which has informed and influenced culture to the nth degree. I mean, when you read something like Frankenstein, for example, I'm not sure if you've ever read Frankenstein.
Yes, in English class actually.
There we go, like
Yeah.
example of it being on like in the canon majorly. I think Frankenstein is one of those books we do a lot at school, and I think the great thing about Frankenstein when you read it is you see how much it has influenced pop culture, and I mean, I think the most interesting thing with the example of Frankenstein, I don't want to go off on a tangent here, but when you think about how different the book is from the films and how we see, Frankenstein as a monster in popular culture, we see Frankenstein, we think like, like this,
Yeah,
walking
the
around
deformed
with
guy with all the different bits and stuff.
when that's in the book it's Dr. Frankenstein and the monster. And I think there's a lot to say for how these books that have been so influential and have shaped culture, there's a lot to say for how, like, it tells us about society when we read them, because the way that those books have been picked up by society and been picked up by people and been, almost manipulated, I think that tells us a lot about how we perceive uh, elements of the world because of how we perceive elements of texts. If that makes sense. So that was such
Yeah.
a long answer.
So, so you're saying that like your kind of mindset when you're sort of reading Jane Eyre is, I suppose that's something I've not really appreciated before. That it's not the same as, okay, I'm on an airplane for 2 hours and I just need something to pass the time. I'm going to pick up paranormal romance fiction. It's more of a sort of, what sort of mindset are you approaching it then? Is it a sort of, this is a serious work that needs a sort of academic mindset? Like how do you think about reading a book like Jane Eyre, for example?
I don't think it's so much of seeing it as a serious work, even though I'd be lying if I said that sometimes I didn't pick up a classic and go, oh, I'm going to read this because I should read it. Um, but I think, yeah, that is a mindset that you have to go into it with, in the sense that when you, I mean, I can't even tell you what that mindset is, but sometimes, how sometimes you would go for the paranormal romance and other times you're going to go for a self-help book,
Hmm.
or you're going to go for something which is it's just got a different vibe to it. And I think it's the same with when you pick up something like Jane Eyre. If I'm feeling more intellectual, I will go for Jane Eyre. And sometimes you just wake up feeling more intellectual. So I always have like a classic, and then a trashy beach novel on the side as well. So
Nice.
I think it's yeah, I think it's just a lot about your mood and how you're approaching it. And I guess the key thing is looking for those moments where you are more likely to appreciate the classics. So even if you don't find yourself waking up and going, oh, you know what, I'm not, you might not wake up thinking, oh, I'm ready to read Great Expectations, but um, there will be times where you just are more, you're in a mindset where you're going to appreciate it more. And in those moments, you should just go for it and like try reading them, because they're always, they're always better than you think they're going to be as well. I think there's something quite daunting about going like, we're going to read David Copperfield now, and then you actually read it and it's wonderful. But actually getting that motivation to pick up that book can
Mm.
actually hard at first when you're not really into classics.
Yeah, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Like, also on Audible, I always have a few different kind of books that I'm listening to. Usually, I've got a sort of a long ass fantasy series that I'm listening to, and if it's like if I've kind of finished a day at work and I'm driving home, usually I'm pretty tired at that point, and so I think, okay, I'm just going to listen to this fantasy book. But often on the drive to work, I think, okay, you know what? I'm going to start the day strong, and then I'll listen to like a non-fiction book about like morality or sociology or whatever, just to sort of get me into that kind of mindset. So I suppose with classics and sort of beachy, like trashy beach books, it's a sort of similar vibe.
Yeah, I feel like it's literally the exact same dichotomy, really. Um, But also, I mean, actually, I say trashy beach novels, but I feel like actually that's a really just bad way to label any kind of literature. And I just did something I really don't like to do. Saying that literature is inherently trashy.
Okay, yeah, no, I think
Right?
we're both kind of on the same page as using the phrase trashy beach novel sort of semi-ironically, like knowing that actually,
Yeah, yeah. It's
all
actually
of these
great.
books have their value in different ways, and you know. um, so when we last spoke, which was a few months ago, around about VidCon time, you recommended the book The Motivation Myth, which
Yeah.
I subsequently read and absolutely loved, and it just gave me so many kind of, the thing I really like about certain kind of self-helpy slash non-fiction books is that they give you the language to describe stuff that you might not have had the language to describe before. And kind of Motivation Myth was certainly that for me. Like, I've always kind of thought that, this whole, I need motivation to get started. It doesn't quite work. But I haven't really had the vocabulary to explain it. And now I'm like, oh, obviously, action leads to success, leads to motivation. It's like a little loop. It's just such a straightforward idea. I was wondering what other sort of self-help books have kind of influenced you in interesting ways that you would say?
Another book actually, which is fairly similar to The Motivation Myth, is Drive by Daniel H. Pink. I think that's it. It's either Daniel or David, and I always get it mixed up whenever I mention it. I'm always like, oh yeah, it's Daniel H. Pink, and then it ends up being David H. Pink. But that's a really wonderful book. It's similarly going over the psychology behind motivation and ambition, and I'd say that it's it is actually very, very similar. I think I read that one after reading The Motivation Myth, and it was a great one to build on because it was slightly longer and more in depth. But I still think The Motivation Myth is the ultimate good one. I'm just trying to think. I mean, I feel like I don't have many to suggest. I can't think of any that were like super influential. The Miracle Morning, actually. Have you read that one?
No, I've never heard of it. What's that about?
So it's this man who it's the autobiography / self-help book of this man who was in a really bad car accident. He had semi-permanent brain damage after the car accident, and he, I think he just lost his job as well at the same time. So he was at a complete low in his life, and it's him talking about how he got on top of that and actually changed around his life so that through using morning routines. So the whole book is he's now made this huge thing called the Miracle Morning, which is, I think it's a website, and it's like got workbooks and things, and he coaches people on how to make their perfect morning using these 6 or 7 steps, which he thinks are integral to any good morning. And that was really interesting. I mean, I think the thing with self-help books, I'm not sure if you find this, sometimes people can seem so insistent when you're reading them. They're like, this is the one and only way to do it. This is how you do X, Y, or Z. But I do think that sometimes, and I did find this with the Miracle Morning, there were aspects where I was just thinking, this is I don't really agree with this. I don't think that's a necessary part of a morning if you're going to have like a really good morning. But for the most part, it was useful, and it went into enough depth that I walked away with something meaningful.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I think that's often a good. I think that's often a good kind of bar for a book. It's like, for me, I feel like if I've taken away just one idea from it, then it is worth the £7 and 3 hours that it took me to read the book. And
yeah, interest.
Yeah.
Sorry.
And then, yeah.
No, you go.
And then I was going to say that it's always kind of fun, in a way, like when I started using Goodreads properly and sort of keeping a log of all the books that I'd read. It's just kind of it kind of feels like a bit of a game, really. Like, you're like, oh yes, I've ticked off another book off the list, and like, all right, where's the next one? And it's like a real sense of discovery and adventure that I didn't have prior to making a Goodreads account. So that's something that I would recommend everyone does if they want to get into reading a bit more. It
kind of gamifies it, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Goodreads.
Yeah. So Miracle Morning, that's going to be added to my list. That sort of segues us nicely into, I wanted to ask about your morning routine, because I've seen some of your videos where it's sort of you seem to have a very elaborate morning and nighttime routine, and I wondered to what extent, like, because like my morning routine, for like a few days at a time, I will have like the perfect morning routine. I'll wake up, I'll make my coffee, I'll do some meditation for like 10 minutes, I do a bit of writing, but I sustain it for like 2 or 3 days, and then I just end up being a waste man. So what does your kind of average morning routine look like on like a totally normal day where you're not sort of filming for the, for the content?
For the content. It is very similar. Like I do keep a morning routine. And I'm trying to think now of how exactly I have managed to sustain it for so long, because I do have very, as you said, very elaborate mornings. But Yeah, wait, do you want me to run through what
Yeah, no, please. If you can run through your morning routine, and then I will sort of, if you can impart your wisdom about how you maintain such a elaborate, structured morning routine.
Of course. Okay, well, I'm gonna have to hope that I can actually impart some very useful advice, but I'm not sure if I can. So I don't judge my morning routine by what time, by the time, but rather the length of time that the morning routine takes me. So I have a set, hour and a half, depending, because I change my morning routine up a lot, where I do all of the things I would do in my morning routine. But if I wake up at 6, then I will have done that by 7, and if I wake up at 7, then I've done that by 8. So it's not like I'm in a privileged position too, because I'm a student, and I feel like I don't have the pressures of like having to be somewhere at 9 for work, or needing to condense my morning routine. Depending on, like, if I wake up late, I could still have my morning routine, whereas I know that that's not possible for everyone. So I wake up, I immediately get ready. No, I don't. Oh my gosh. Okay, wait. My morning routine changes a lot. This is the issue. I change my morning routine like every 4 weeks, maybe,
Oh,
which
damn.
is a lot.
That's a new video every 4 weeks.
Yeah, exactly. It's just for the content.
Of course.
Um, I actually, this, say, with regards to what you asked about, like how am I able to maintain an elaborate morning routine? I do think it is in part due to the fact that I know that I'm going to be using this morning routine for a set length of time. It's not going to be something which I'm planning on using for years and years. And I actually think that that's quite it's quite a nice thought, because your morning routine continues to be novel, and you always wake up in the morning and you're always excited because it's something new. It's not something which has yet become a rut. It kind of gives you that sense of renewed purpose every day, which I really, really like. So at the moment, I will try and wake up at like 6:30 or 7, and I always get, like, open my window, get some fresh air, and then I'm getting ready at the moment immediately. Then I go outside and stretch and do power poses outside as well. Then I will come inside and usually sit down at my desk to do emails if I need to do them, and also writing. So I'll just sit down and write for like 20 minutes. Then I go downstairs and get breakfast. And yeah, that's the basis of the morning routine. There are little bits and bobs that I've missed out, but yeah.
That's so. I really like the idea of having a routine that you do for 4 weeks at a time. Because I think one of the issues I have with morning routines is that whenever I think about kind of making a morning routine, it feels like a sort of a big deal almost. I'm like, this is the morning routine I need to have forever. This is the morning routine I need to be able to make like a compelling video about as well. And it puts kind of a lot of baggage on the morning routine. So maybe, yeah. All right, I'm going to start doing that sort of morning routine 30 days at a time. And then, hey, I tried out this morning routine for 30 days, then becomes content, doesn't it?
Yeah, literally every single month. It's like, I tried this morning routine and this morning routine. But it's great because I think the other thing that you really walk away with is you realize what things really work for you. So I actually have a long list. It's like 2 pages long of possible things I could have in a morning routine, which is maybe a bit extra. But there are things that I've heard other people do, or they've occurred to me that month, and I just keep on adding them to the list. And then when you're making a new one, you can look over this list and think, oh, I'm going to try this out because I've never tried this before.
Yeah.
And so you get to try new things. And I mean, like the power poses, I do them every morning, and they've always been a part of my morning routine for like, I'd say 2 years now, which is quite a long time considering I change up the morning routine so much. And that's because I put that into one morning routine. I felt a massive change in how in how it made me feel for the rest of the day. And so I knew that was something that I wanted to always keep in my morning routine. So I definitely see less fluctuation in the routine than I maybe used to, because I've tried out more and more things and I know what works for me. But yeah.
Nice. Oh, mate, I'm making a list on this kind of post-it note as I go along. So I think this idea of having a list of a sort of morning routine bucket list is
Yeah,
really cool as
yeah,
well, because then
like that.
yeah, then like every month you're like, oh, okay, what I'm going to try this month? Let's try the power posing thing. Let's try doing some yoga for whatever that's
Yeah,
worth.
will it work? Will I like it?
Yeah. So I think it's interesting how you have a sort of experimentalist sort of approach to this, where you're like, okay, let me just try this, and then you'll see how it makes you feel, and sort of use that to inform future kind of decisions.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. What's the deal with power posing? I've seen, is it Amy Cuddy's TED talk about this, but that was years and years ago, and I haven't sort of looked at it since.
Well, okay, so I actually heard about this when I was in year 12 from a drama teacher at school. And she said, whenever you go for an interview, a job interview or university interview, always do a power pose beforehand, which is where you make your body really big. So you go like this. I think you should hold it for about a minute. So I usually hold mine for like 1 or 2 minutes, and it gets adrenaline pumping through your veins. It's I don't know why it releases it. I guess you're the doctor, Ali. You tell me why, but it gets the adrenaline flowing. Is that like, what verb do you even use for adrenaline?
Flowing, pumping, I don't know. Whatever you like, really.
Yeah. So when you get then the adrenaline kind of just gives you, or I find it makes me feel more motivated. So then I've got more energy, and it drives me forward in my morning routine. And I mean, with mornings, the reason I think morning routines are so important is because the morning you have will completely set up how good or bad your day is going to be. And I mean, yeah, the things you do in your morning are going to change the way that you interact with the rest of the day. So I think having that motivation in the morning is so necessary if I'm then going to feel motivated for the rest of the day. So power poses are good.
Oh, sick. Have you got a segment of your morning routine where you sort of write a to-do list of kind of stuff that you need to get done that day? Like how do you kind of plan your day?
I usually do it the night before. So I write a to-do list the night before, and then I transfer it into a timetable in the morning. And that's not always, minute by minute, like 8 to 8:30, I'll do this, even though sometimes it is. It might just be like numbering things. So I go, first task of the day is this, second is this, third is this. But I do all the planning the night before.
Okay. So you have like a to-do list, or like what does it look like? I'm asking all the specific questions. I do apologize.
Yeah. Okay. So again, I'm not very. I don't stick to one kind of to-do
Sure.
list.
Yeah.
Do kind of mix it up depending on my mood. Typically, what I have is so I use Todoist to keep track of loads and loads of to-dos. Like there are just reams of things there which separate into boards. Like one day I'd love to do this, or these are admin tasks you need to get done. So when I write my to-do list, I will go through these and see, because I try and do at least a few things off those larger to-do lists, as well as the more immediate tasks that I know I need to get done tomorrow, just to make sure you're staying proactive and on top of things every day. Then I transfer that into a to-do list, usually again digitally for that to-do list, and then in the morning I write a paper to-do list. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I think to-do lists are another aspect in which I think I give them, I put too much baggage on them, because I think, okay, well, if I'm ever using a new to-do list app or anything, I know it's going to feature in a video at some point, and then I think, oh well, I have to use this app constantly, otherwise, it's not fair if I review it. But actually, I think for me, what I do is each day I have some sort of a to-do list, but like sometimes it's on post-it notes, sometimes it's on paper, sometimes it's on like whatever different app I can be bothered to use that day.
Which app do you go for the most?
So these days I actually do a lot of it in Roam Research. I don't know if that's one that you've come across.
No, I haven't. How does that work?
So that's like a sort of relatively hot new note-taking app. The idea is that each day just gives you a blank slate, which is your daily note for the day. And the innovation in Rome is that you can create bi-directional links between stuff. So let's say I'm saying, had a chat with Ruby Granger, and I would tag your name in it, and then it would automatically create a page called Ruby Granger, and then that page would automatically link to every time I've ever referenced Ruby Granger. So if I were to go on a page that has your name on it, I can be like, oh, I wrote in February 2020 that we had that brunch at the pancake place, and okay. So it sort of draws these in things automatically. And the idea behind it is that whereas most note-taking apps are sort of hierarchical in that you would have like a divider and then like a notebook and then a note. That's not really the structure of human memory. It's much more about sort of this thing links with all these different things, which link with all these other bits. And so
you might just convert me to trying this out.
It's really interesting. You should definitely try it out. Especially for things like kind of taking notes from books and stuff, where I found that because I've started taking notes on the books that I've read in Rome, I found that there's actually sort of insights that I've generated just by virtue of using the app, because it's drawn in sort of two unrelated things about happiness that my own brain hadn't quite clocked was like a connection. Be like, oh, okay, that book actually links with that book because they're both sort of within this theme of happiness.
Fascinating. But I'm assuming it eliminates words like and it's.
Yeah.
So just the keywords.
It's the keywords, and in that you can choose to define what a keyword is. So you can kind of highlight the word happiness and sort of press the bracket thing on your keyboard, and it will turn that into a keyword. And then when you're on that page, it'll show you all the official links that you've made for it, but also anytime you've said the word happiness without explicitly linking it, and it gives you the option. So then you can look through your list of be like, oh, was happiness really relevant to that? Okay, I'll just link those, and it creates these links very easily. But
so have you found yourself thinking more critically about? Have you seen a tangible difference in how you're approaching, the aftermath of reading a new book, having started doing this?
Yeah, definitely. And actually, so occasionally I get the question from people on like podcasts and stuff, being like, "What's your one regret in life, or what's something you wish you would tell your 15-year-old self?" And the answer to that question is always, "I wish I'd been taking notes on all the books that I'd read since like the age of 11 onwards, because it's just like so valuable." And so now what I do is that.
Right. That's.
Yeah, it's just like every time I read a book, there's sort of a book about this called How to Take Smart Notes. I don't know if that's one that you've come across.
No, I haven't. It sounds good though.
Yeah, mate, it's by this guy called Sonky Orens, and it sort of introduces this sort of note-taking method called the slipbox, or the Zettelkasten, which was discovered by some German dude kind of a few decades ago. And this German dude was famous because he like churned out like loads and loads and loads of scientific papers about sociology and loads of books, and seemed to have this sort of relatively stress-free life where he was just kind of reading stuff and sort of coming up with these amazing novel insights. And this guy was saying that the reason he was able to do all of that was just purely by virtue of this note-taking system, where anything he read, he would have to sort of rephrase in his own words and rephrase as like an evergreen note, and then that would fit into his like little slip box, which happened all sort of on paper. But now there's all these kind of new note-taking apps that let you create that sort of structure just within the context of the app. And so now when I read a book, I sort of use the smart notes methodology to try and create my own evergreen notes from it, and then that fits into stuff on Rome and kind of helps me see insights and stuff. At least that's the idea.
It's absolutely amazing. Literally, I'm exactly the same as you. I always mean to take notes on books, and literally since I was like 15, I've tried to take notes on every single book. But when you're reading the book, you're thinking, okay, I'm gonna immediately go and write a long spiel about everything I learned from this and all the key things, and then you finish it and you think, oh yeah, but I always just go on straight to the next book, and then I kind of forget that it's there, and then I end up confusing. Actually, the most embarrassing thing that I've had with confusing books, I accidentally once got the two plots that I got the plots mixed up between Daphne du Maurier's Rebecca, which is a semi-classic, and a book called Fairy Princess or Fairy Dust or something that I read as a kid, because I feel like it can be so easy just to blur books together, and so having like a tangible way of looking at the book, like being able to find that book and looking at it and actually realizing, what did I think about that when I read it? What did I gain from it? Because you do gain so much from books, and sometimes you almost, well, you can forget that until you're given either a trigger to think about it, or if you've actually taken notes, then obviously that's 100 times superior.
Yeah. And so one issue that I have with books as well is that sort of like I'm reading one at the moment called The Righteous Mind, and I've just read another one called The Elephant in the Brain, which are all about sort of the foundations of moral psychology and where our intuitions about what is right and wrong comes from, and why certain people will always vote for like the left wing party and why others will always vote for the right wing party, and it's not. I think it's very easy for us to think, oh, I'm a university student, obviously I'm going to vote Labour. Obviously anyone who votes Conservative is evil and mean, and how can you not care about those poor people? But actually it's really not that simple, and there are very compelling reasons as to why people do vote Conservative. And this book sort of examines all of these moral intuitions and sort of posits that we actually all have that as a human species, we've got these 6 different sort of moral taste bud receptor type things. And sort of left-wing ideologies appeal to some of them and right-wing ideologies appeal to others. And when it comes to an idea like that, I think like as I was kind of reading this book, I could sort of feel my sort of perspective changing on it.
Yeah.
But it's one of those things that if I don't then kind of write down all of like how I'm feeling as I'm reading this, it'll just become a part of my thinking process, and then it's going to feel like it's going to feel so obvious because I'm going to see the patterns everywhere. But then if asked to explain it, I wouldn't necessarily be able to sort of explain why that came about or appreciate kind of how it felt before that. Like I remember when I first read Tim Ferriss's 4-Hour Workweek, which I'd say is one of the books that most changed my life. After that, kind of the idea of setting up multiple streams of passive income and having these mini retirements and stuff just became so obvious. But to someone who hasn't discovered it, and to me before I read that book, it was completely novel. And I think note-taking sort of crystallizes those insights and sort of puts them down on paper in a way that not taking notes in a book doesn't.
And actually, it's interesting thinking about that, because I'm not sure if you do find this. Maybe you don't. But the books that I have taken notes on, it's probably just coincidental because the books that I like the most, the books I'm more inclined to actually sit down and take notes on. But they're always the ones that I properly remember, and they're always the books that I end up, applying what you've gained from that book to, to your life, to your thought process around certain things. I mean, something like I read The Children Act by Ian McEwan. I'm not sure most of the books I read are fiction, so I read a fair few self-help books, but like you are the self-help view when it comes to that. But The Children Act was the best book I read last year, and when I finished it, I sat down and I just said, okay, Ruby, just sit down for 15 minutes and write about what you gained from this book. And I feel like I remember that book so much more specifically than other books that I did read last year. And yes, it might be just because I really enjoyed it, but I don't think it's as simple as that. I mean, The Children Act, just to give you an overview, I'm not sure if you have read it or even
I haven't. I heard about it in one of your my favorite books type videos a few months ago. I think you referenced it.
Okay, I would have done. So basically it's very insular. It's very contained. This judge called Fiona, she is working on a court case where this boy is a Jehovah's Witness and he's 17. So he needs to be given a blood transfusion if he's going to survive. But obviously his parents and they're both Jehovah's Witness, so that's prohibited. And but the issue is he's 17. So under the Children Act, he doesn't have personal autonomy, so the state can intervene, and his religious beliefs don't have that that level of high ground. And I found it absolutely fascinating because that boundary between childhood and adulthood is fascinating. being able to draw a direct line where you say, okay, in 3 months' time, you have absolute autonomy over your actions and your thoughts. But at the moment, as a 17-year-old, 11-month-year-old, you don't have the right to that autonomy, and you can't have it. And just the way that led me to approach and understand adulthood and childhood maturity, it was so influential. And I don't know that I would have felt the impact of that so much, or like you said before about actually recognizing that it's had the impact. I think that's very, very meaningful and important.
So is this a fiction book or a non-fiction book, this one?
It's fiction. It's fiction.
Okay. So, because one thing I often wonder is, because I read a lot of fiction as well, mostly fantasy and romance, sometimes combined, I often wonder as to sort of what insights am I really taking away from this? And I suppose for a book like that, it is sort of, raising interesting questions about this, as you said, this boundary between childhood and adulthood. For like a, trashy beach novel, it might not raise as many questions, but I wonder, like, how do you think about kind of gaining insights from fiction books? Is that sort of a thought process that's in the front of your mind, or is it more of you're just appreciating the different perspectives?
I do think when you're reading a book, I think it's hard to, when it is fiction at least, to, as you said, actually appreciate fully the impact that this is going to have on you, because you're so contained in the story itself. I think it's more after reading a book that I reflect on that, and I think I've walked away with new insights here, which I think have built me as a person. But I wouldn't say it's something tangible where you look at it and you think, as a result of reading this book, I am now going to, retire to Fiji and spend my evenings by the sea. That's I don't think that's what you gain from most fiction books. I mean, I'm yet to be converted. Maybe I will be. I think the key thing with fiction is, and it's oversaid, I know that I'm not saying anything new here, but in terms of building empathy and understanding people, I feel like books are the most powerful way of doing that, because when it's a first person narrative, you are literally taking on the character of someone else. You are taking on the experience of them. It's as close as you will ever get to not only occupying somebody's body, but actually occupying someone's brain, especially with the growth of things like the neuro novel, where you can actually, I mean, in YA and middle grade fiction, there's been a huge shift in, we're seeing more and more books about mental health in YA and middle grade. It's a huge new trend in the last 5 years, and that's not just us putting ourselves in somebody else's body, that's putting us in somebody else's mind and helping empathy on a level which is so I think it's so important. And even if we don't see tangible change from reading fiction, I do think that all fiction does offer that on some level, but some fiction a lot more than others.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. There's two books that I read recently, kind of that would fall under this category. Have you read Normal People?
Yes, I have.
Oh, so that was so good. I read that in like one night. Someone recommended it, and I just started reading it, and then I was like, I stayed up to like 5 a.m. reading it, and had to work the next morning. So it was an objectively bad idea. But that was just such an interesting insight into, like, the relationships and sort of emotional reliance on people, and just there was so much stuff that I just like never ever experienced, thank God, but also that none of my friends sort of would talk about if they've ever experienced anything like that. And a book like that just really puts you in their shoes in a way that other things can really.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, I mean, even conversations or films or interviews, I think there's something so I mean, I think I'm very biased because I am a huge bookworm, but I think there is something very singular about first person narrative literature, which because you actually completely occupy someone, as opposed to like when you have even when you have a conversation with a friend and you're told about what they're experiencing, you're still not experiencing it from their point of view. You're experiencing it as their friend who is being told about that. Whereas when you're reading it in a text, or I mean, maybe that's not fiction, maybe that's a memoir, maybe that's diary entries, but when you're reading it from that perspective, I think it's not, you stop being yourself temporarily, and then that becomes a part of you as a result.
Yeah, yeah, it really like sort of lets you appreciate just like all of this stuff in a way that you wouldn't be able to, other than experiencing it firsthand.
Yeah.
The book that I was up until I think like 2 a.m. last night reading is called The Flat Share. I don't know if you could come across
No,
this
I
one.
haven't come across this one.
This was some like random person recommended this to me. Oh no! So I was chatting to someone on Bumble and they recommended this book, and I was like, oh, okay, it's a romance book, fair enough, right up my street. And then I just got absolutely hooked on this. The premise is that there's this palliative care nurse who is a guy, and he works night shifts, and then there's this other sort of girl who works as like a book editor. And they're both like fairly broke, and so they have this sort of flat share agreement where she will sleep in his bed during the nighttime and he'll sleep in the bed during the daytime, and they never meet each other. But then they start kind of exchanging like post-it notes with one another, and sort of it's a sort of love story based around that. But there's all sorts of stuff in it, and it sort of writes from both of their individual perspectives. So it was interesting because there's a lot of sort of medical kind of stuff in there that I was like, oh, this is exactly what it's like. But also kind of the girl's previous relationship was quite like emotionally abusive, manipulative, gaslighty, all of that stuff.
Yeah.
And you really get an experience of it that you don't get by just hearing someone talk about those experiences. It's a more first person narrative, as you said.
Yeah, absolutely. I think as well because I mean, I haven't read it, so I can't comment entirely on what the writing style is like. But often when experiences like that are being conveyed, you can see it in, I mean, it's not just the content of what they're saying, but the fact that the way that it's said is, and the language which is used, mirrors and is able to mirror the way that you would think about it, through sentence structure and yeah. And I don't know if that really, I think it would have played a part, even if but we get so used to it that we don't realize. And I think that's the only way, like having that kind of mirrored thought process and being able to read it and actually recognizing that as a thought process, that is what helps it to be not just you're being told something, you're experiencing it.
Okay, so final question on the book front before we move on. So I'm sold on the classics thing. What's the first one that I should read as like a beginner to classics? And so I've read Frankenstein and stuff at school, and I've read Rebecca, which is very good. But yeah, I don't really know where to start, given that I'm a hopeless romantic and I love a book with a bit of romance in it.
Okay. There's so much romance in like every single book ever. I mean, oh my gosh. I would recommend. Oh my gosh, this is so so intense. I want to recommend Great Expectations. I know I've already spoken about it in this, but I think it's, for someone who's starting out with classics, Dickens is such a great place to start because his writing is so well, I mean, it's so cinematic, which is, I mean, his descriptions. I'm not sure. Have you read any Charles Dickens at school?
No, I think I borrowed Great Expectations once from the library and got about 3 pages into it and thought, nope. This was when I was like 12, so.
Okay.
Yeah.
When you start it this time, you'll enjoy it. I'm gonna like promise that, even though I don't know if that's a promise I can keep. I think with Great Expectations, it's so. So I'm trying to think of like a great way to actually just put a great expectation way to put it into perspective. But the fact that the reason I love Great Expectations as a book is that it starts with that. It's got the structure of it's like a coming of age novel kind of, because you see Pip. It starts in his childhood, and then through very significant experiences, he becomes the person that he then is quote unquote supposed to be, and he grows into a different person, very very well, very very different to his childhood self, and just the process of seeing that influence evolve and develop is really fascinating, and kind of in lieu of what we've been saying about how books and things will influence the ideas that you have and how it kind of builds levels of empathy. I do think you see that to a certain level in Great Expectations with the experiences that he goes through.
Okay, cool. I'm sold. Great
And there is
Expectations. I will buy it on Kindle, of course.
I think you can probably get it on free because
Oh yeah, it's like out of copyright or something, isn't it now?
yeah, that's the best. That's the actual reason we'll read classics, because
Yeah,
you know
you'd have to pay for them. Okay, so kind of changing gears a little bit. You are quite open about the fact that you're kind of a bookworm / massive nerd.
yeah.
How are you okay about sort of portraying yourself that way online? Like, and especially because your YouTube channel's been going on for a while now. So you would have so you started it when you were in school, and the image I have of school, and certainly that was the case in my school, is that sort of being a massive nerd is not like a cool thing that you would sort of blatantly advertise online. So how do you kind of think about that? How did you get over that?
So yeah, I started my channel when I was 14, so I was quite young. I was in year 10, which in terms of things being uncool, I think everything's pretty much uncool when you're in year 10, however how hard you try it to be otherwise. So I think the really significant thing is I didn't actually talk about my channel. Most people didn't realize I had a channel until I was in year 12, and by that point it was slightly more established, and also, well, I say slightly, I had like over 1,000 subscribers, so that, I think that kind of gave it more kudos as in a way, and also people got more mature when you went into sixth form anyway. But I didn't have an issue with broadcasting the fact that I was extremely nerdy and an extreme bookworm, because that is kind of the image that I portrayed at school anyway. So even if people found my content, that wasn't such a big issue for me, because it was the same image I was putting out when I was actually, in lessons or talking with people. And I mean, definitely that did not make me cool, but at the same time, I think there's so much to be said for, or at least what I found through embracing that, and through really making a point of the fact that I was a nerd, and I knew I was a nerd, and I didn't care about that. I think at a certain point, maybe around mid year 11, people began to respect that, and people didn't make fun of it anymore. It became, oh, that's actually quite cool that you are choosing to be utterly uncool. Okay, I'm just gonna tell you how nerdy I was. We had a Thorpe Park trip booked when I was in year 11 to celebrate like the end of it was right before Easter holidays. It was to say congratulations for working so hard all year, and I said, oh no, but I haven't got that many geography lessons left and I don't want to miss it, so I stayed at school instead of going to Thorpe Park so that I could go to lessons.
Oh wow, okay, that's like next level nerd.
Thank you.
Interesting. Yeah, I think it was kind of the same pattern in my school. Like for the first few years, like being a nerd was actively uncool. But then I think as GCSEs rolled around and everyone was like, oh, actually, I'd kind of like to get some decent grades to get to a decent university, the sort of nerds started getting a small segment of street cred back.
Little bit.
Yeah, I mean,
you say that you were a nerd at school?
Oh god, yeah, absolutely. But like like me and my friends still weren't invited to any of the cool kids parties. But I think we got a bit more respect.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so your YouTube channel has been going on for six years now. How do you keep going with it? Like, I mean, like mine's been going for I think just past the 3-year mark, and
3 years is a long time though.
Yeah, it's like a really long time, and I always have these, like even earlier today, Basically, it's because we put out a video earlier today and it was 10 out of 10 on the analytics. So, the worst performing video for the last 10.
Oh
And
my gosh, I hate
anytime
that
that
so
happens,
much.
I'm just like, oh, okay, right. why am I even doing this YouTube?
Well,
Throw in the
so
towel, just leave right now. Yeah, how do you keep going for such a long time? Like what sustains the motivation, even though we both know that's a myth?
yes. Well, I mean, there's not really it's a really simple answer, and that's just that I enjoy making the content I do. And I guess as well, I mean, one thing to keep in mind is, yes, I've been making study-based content for 5 years, but it's like five years, 4 months that I've had the channel. So yes, I've been making study content for that long, but also I think the way that I've made it and the way that my content has developed is means that the content I put out at the start is, as I know you'll agree with, like your early content, like it's very different.
So bad.
It's awful.
So bad.
But I think that there's a lot to be said for you, because you change as a creator. It means that even if your content is on, like I'm still a study tuber, I still make study-based content, but the content to me is actually very different in all ways to the content I first put out. So yeah, but mainly like the motivation just because the main reason that there is motivation there is that I don't see YouTube as work in any capacity, like the work play dichotomy as the motivation myth. We love that. Because I see it as play still, and because I still see it as something which is, I do on the side of doing academics, I do on the side of life. I just do it, because it's fun and because I like making content. I think that means that it never has, well, it hasn't yet become something which I have to fight to do,
Yeah, that makes
I mean,
sense.
you must feel that, like, I mean, considering, because obviously you work as a doctor, so YouTube is in some capacity, not work in the strictest sense.
Yeah, like that's often what I say to people as well. Like when you enjoy the stuff that you do, you don't really need motivation to do it. Like
Yeah.
I usually don't need motivation to sort of film a video. Occasionally there are days where like, oh crap, we got a sponsored
Really?
video deadline for next week, and I'm on nights for the rest of the week. Oh god, I need to film a video. But that happens very, very occasionally. I think to be honest with everything, like any like learning a musical instrument, playing a sport, there are always going to be those moments where you sort of are thinking, oh, this is a bit of a drag. I CBA with this right now, and then you could have push through, and you're always glad that you did in hindsight. One thing that I'm somewhat concerned about is that, so from August I'm going to be unemployed as a doctor, so because I'm taking a bit of a sabbatical from medicine, and so in a way, like the YouTube thing is going to become just by default my full-time gig, and I'm really worried about that because I'm like, I think it changes the relationship that you have with it, and so I've been really trying hard to find things that I can do with my time that are not just churning out more content. And part of the reason why I made this sort of decision that I wanted to try and move to America, take this medical exam, but I think a big part of that reason is that it just kind of gives me something to do that's not just make YouTube videos. I don't know how healthy that is, but yeah, I like the fact that it's still a part-time sort of side gig rather than a full-time job.
Yeah, I know entirely what you mean. I mean, for that reason, I think it would be so hard to go full time with YouTube. Like, I can never imagine doing that because I feel like the content would become, for me, I know that it would become stale, and I don't think I'd enjoy making it to the same level. Which is, it's so weird, isn't it? Because you'd expect that you'd enjoy it, because you enjoy it, you kind of expect that if you did it full time, you'd enjoy it even more. But I mean, I'm on summer holidays at the moment, and so I mean, YouTube is pretty. I'm doing some work with an organization on the side as well, but I am am I a full-time YouTuber at the moment? Kind of, I guess, because I'm on summer holidays, and I think there is a big danger. And I did find this last year where I just thought, okay, I'm going to make as much content. You said about like, I'd just be churning out content. Last year I was just like, oh yeah, I'm going to just make content every day, just like upload loads of stuff, because I didn't have anything else to do. But I think it's that mindset which really really leads to that debilitating relationship with the content that you're creating. So, I mean, this summer I've said, you really don't upload any more than 2 videos a week because you're going to stop enjoying making the content if you do that.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's like such an important part of it. There's a guy called Derek Sivers, who's one of my favorite authors. So I did one of these deep dive interviews with a few weeks ago. He has this thing where he says that the most surefire way to stop loving your art is by trying to make a living from it. And his theory is that, well, if you ask professional artists, they're actually spending most of their time not doing the art. They're spending most of their time doing admin and emails and business stuff.
Yeah.
And sort of his view is that the ideal is where you've got like a job that makes you money, and then you have like a hobby, and then sort of feel free to monetize that hobby to an extent, because I think adding the monetization aspect to a hobby makes the hobby inherently more interesting. But as soon as it becomes your sole source of income, your job, it loses that, and it just
And
becomes work.
that is really interesting. I haven't thought about it that way before. Gonna have to look into it. I'm gonna have to read his book.
Yeah, man, it's so good. It's one of the books that changed my life. His whole spiel as well is just like really interesting. It's mostly about how actually you should think hard about the things that you really want, and not just chase numerical success just for its own sake. So his kind of
Which is so
backstory.
easy to do, I think. Like, because
Yeah,
it's ingrained in capitalist culture, isn't it?
yeah, absolutely.
That's how you're successful.
And how kind of the hedonic adaptation, the new normal, back in the day, getting 2 new subscribers a day, like, oh my god, two new subscribers a day. Now
Literally,
it's
do you
like,
remember that?
yeah,
You'd be refreshing, you'd be like, oh my gosh, I can't believe it went up by one overnight.
yeah. And now it's like, a video doesn't perform well, it's only got 50,000 views. Oh my god, I might as well end my life right now. It's
It's
just
just
so
so
bad.
crazy. I think the danger when you become fixated on analytics is you begin to forget how, because I mean 50,000 people is so many people. It's
Yeah,
more than you can
it's huge. It's
imagine.
absolutely staggering. Yeah.
And yet when you see 50,000, because it's in comparison to a video which has got 100,000 views, you think, oh well, that's not very good. That hasn't helped that many people. And then you actually think about it, and wait, 50,000 people is actually a lot of
Yeah,
people.
that's like more than you can really imagine. Like, what does 50,000 even look like? Like a whole stadium, a whole arena? Who knows?
Yeah, I don't know. I how need to find this out. I always love that, like trying to find a way to actually put these numbers into perspective. But even when you look at a stadium, I don't think you can properly
Yeah, appreciate how many people
appreciate it.
that really is. So actually, just kind of on that note, and completely unrelated to anything I wanted to talk to you about, was sort of this idea of scope insensitivity, and this is quite popular in the sort of effective altruism, sort of giving to charity type sphere, whereby if you see injustice happening in front of you, you have a certain sort of feeling type response to it. But if it's happening somewhere else in the world, it just becomes a statistic. There is absolutely no way anyone is going to feel anything for like a kid dying in Africa, but you're going to feel something for the kid dying in front of you, even though rationally those lives should not absolutely not be worth any different amount. And so like a few months ago when I was really looking into this, I thought I was wondering whether is there something wrong with me that I really can't bring myself to actually care about the suffering of people across the world from me, like am I sort of devoid of emotion and this, that, and the other. And then I started
Yeah,
kind of researching about this, and like everyone is like that. Like almost no one can bring themselves to actually
yeah.
care about the lives of
People
someone in a
really
different country.
empathize.
And so the idea behind all the effective altruism stuff is that you should recognize that and give to the charities anyway, even if you don't feel like it, because you recognize that actually my brain is not equipped to create these sorts of feelings, because that would just be purely completely short-circuiting all of our evolutionary behaviors and stuff. So
That is fascinating. I might have to read that. Like, what was the name of the book?
the one that kind of started all of this was Peter Singer's The Life You Can Save.
Oh, Peter Singer's great.
Yeah. And it's just it's just always so uncomfortable being like, well, I'd pay £2,000 to save a kid in front of me, but ask me to donate £2,000 to Against Malaria Foundation. Suddenly it's a lot.
Yeah, I and it
Yeah.
you are right, because when you think about that, and when you think about your, emotional, visceral reaction to those two things, they are so removed from each other. And it does make you feel like an awful person.
Yeah. Anyway, moving on. To what extent do you do the whole meditation mindfulness stuff? Is that part of your life? I mean, I feel like it fits very well with your brand, but I don't know if you actually do it.
I don't really do it actually. But I do. Well, it kind of fluctuates. I sometimes have meditation as part of my morning routines, but not always. And I mean, I do like it when I do it, but it's not one of the habits that I've kept consistently for years on end. Okay. Mindfulness, though, I would say that I practice or try to practice on a daily basis. But I think with mindfulness, it's not so much you sit there and you've got to, breathe in a certain way, and then you're practicing mindfulness. For me, it's just finding activities which help to alleviate any sense of anxiety or preoccupation, and I label those things as mindfulness, and I do practice those things actively to curb anxious thoughts.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. There was on a related vein, there's a phrase I came across sometime last year, which is it was actually from this like pamphlet about how to deep clean your house. But there's like a good
always very influential stuff, of course.
No, exactly, yeah. But there's life-changing insights right there. But the advice that they say, which is very simple, is just do what you're doing, and the idea that if you're washing the dishes, then wash the dishes. If you're sort of sweeping the floor, then sweep the floor, and you just sort of fully absorb yourself in doing the thing that you're doing, rather than what I tend to do, which is like, right, if I'm cleaning the dishes, that's a waste of time. I need to have an audiobook on at 2.7x speed, because then I can get more insights out of this nonfiction book, and then it's just
literally, yeah. Oh my gosh. I was going to ask you earlier, what speed do you listen to your audiobooks on? Because I knew you listened to them at that speed. I just knew.
Yeah. Yeah, like, so for fiction audiobooks, I was a 1x speed purist for about 2 years, until I think 3 or 4 months ago, when I discovered the incredible power of 2.5x, and now my mind is blown, and now I can read 2.5 times as many fantasy audiobooks as I would have been able to before.
You like, what I always do is put it on 3 first, listen to that for 5 minutes, and then put it down to 2.5, and then it feels so slow, and I'm like, wow, I can really relish the literature. Like, tricking your brain into doing it is quite fun.
That's a good idea. Yeah, occasionally I go 3x, but especially for like the long fantasy books, it becomes quite hard to actually keep up with what's being said.
Yeah, like, no, absolutely.
I've missed stuff here. Rewind. But yeah, I think 2.5x is like a good middle ground. And usually podcasts, around 2.5x as well.
Yeah.
Except occasionally, like if it's a particularly sort of dense discussion, like the one that I remember was on the Ezra Klein show. He was having this discussion with some Yale law school professor about the meritocracy and why meritocracy is a myth. And the way they were arguing the topic was just so like highbrow that there was no way I could keep up at like 1.5. I had to go down to 1x speed for that. I was like, right, I need to pause. I need to understand what he said. That's a really good point. How did you think of that so quickly? Oh my God, this guy's a genius.
Yeah. No, I completely agree with you on that. There are some podcasts I have to pause halfway through, or like audiobooks. You listen to it and you're like, wait, no, come on. Need to actually understand what you were saying there.
Yeah. The speed thing is interesting. Like, I'm a strong believer that listening at 2x, 2.5x speed is the way forward. But I think, the other side of the debate is like, why do you feel the need to rush through life? Why not enjoy stuff when
I mean, I think it's for me there is a big difference between, like, when I listen to anything educational, when it's nonfiction, and I'm listening to it so that I can gain something from it. I will always listen to that, or like watch the video as fast as I possibly can, and while still understanding it and taking something away from it. Because that's just being effective with your time. Like, that's just
absolutely. Productivity.
But when it comes to fiction, I can't skim read. I can't. And if I listen to, I don't listen to fiction audiobooks, but if I were listening to spoken word poetry on YouTube, I would never speed that up. I just couldn't imagine speeding that up. So it's, I really do think that actually, like say, talking about mindfulness, I think that that does shine a light on, mindfulness isn't always necessary, I don't think, in every single area of your life. I think it's necessary to be mindful with those things that matter to you and that can actually help to bring some level of serenity.
Yeah. Oh, that's a nice word. Serenity.
That's a good. I never use it enough. When a word comes up that you hardly ever use, and you think, I need to make use of
Yeah, I
this.
need to manufacture occasions in my life where I can drop in the word serenity. Okay, so we've got a few questions from the gram. Um, this one's interesting from Fizzer_AKV, which is, where do you see yourself in 5 to 10 years time? How do you feel about that sort of question and sort of long-term life plans?
Um, okay, so I'm actually so bad when it comes to these kinds of questions because I have no idea really. Um, I I think I try to think about my future in terms of less specific, so not thinking about a specific career that I want to be in or a job that I want to be excelling at or promotion I'm going to be getting or anything like that. Nothing specific. I try to think instead when I think 10 years in the future, I want to think about how I'm manifesting and working towards and focusing on personal priorities and things that matter to me. So, in 10 years' time, I want to be doing something which is quote unquote important and helping a group of people. So whether that means that I'm going to be working in an NGO, whether that means I'm going to be volunteering somewhere, I don't know. But my goals are much less like kind of this year or during lockdown actually, as I've really started thinking about what I want, what do I want to be, what do I want to do. I'm trying to think about it in terms of priorities as opposed to specific things because opportunities come up where you least expect them, and so I don't want to kind of constrict myself and think this is where I'm going to be in 10 years because what if I keep on working towards that and then as a consequence I don't take an opportunity which actually would take me somewhere that I would much rather be.
Yeah, that's like my exact spiel for the 5 to 10 year plan goal as well. Is that like life is just so uncertain. Like, a few years ago, I would have had absolutely no idea, how much of a difference, for example, this YouTube channel was going to make to my life, and so to make any sort of 5 to 10 year plan just seems sort of
Yeah.
guesswork at best and sort of shackling you to a future you might not want at worst. And
Yeah.
so my view on this is always that I think I like to think about trying to enjoy each day on its own merit rather than in pursuit of some kind of higher goal. And so I've always sort of railed against a mentality that a lot of my medical student friends used to have, which is that, I just need to battle through med school, and once that 6 years is over, then I'll be happy once I'm a doctor. And I was always a bit uneasy about this. I was like, I don't think
think
life
that's
as a doctor is going to be that much better than life as a medical student. I think we got it pretty good, guys. Yeah, so that's sort of how I feel about
So you take
goals.
individual successes day by day, you
Yeah,
mean?
as in, so the way I think of it is that I want to kind of maximize randomness and optionality. So I want to keep the options open so that if an interesting opportunity does come up, which I wouldn't be able to predict in advance, then I'll have the freedom and the sort of the capacity to kind of say yes
Yeah.
to it if that's what I want to at the time. And I think that's one of the things whereby having something like a YouTube channel or like a personal blog or like anything public facing like that just exposes you to infinitely more possibilities than you or I would get if we didn't have YouTube channels, for example.
100%.
And that's like a big part of why my spiel for most people is that if you want something to do, start a YouTube channel, start a blog, start a Twitter account where you're sharing interesting things. Like
Yeah.
it just connects you with people in interesting ways that there's just no way you can predict it, but
Great.
you hope that something might come out of it. And at the very least, it just means you get connected to more people and you have chats like this one, for example.
Yeah, exactly.
Um, okay, here's another interesting one. That's how do you find purpose in what you do?
Ooh, okay, that is
That's
that is a
juicy.
big question. How do you find purpose? I feel like that's one of those trillion-dollar questions that everyone just wants the answer to,
Mm.
really, and no one will ever for certain have it. Um,
Do you find purpose in making the YouTube videos, making the content?
yes, I mean, yeah, no, I would say so. I think when, but I think that purpose comes because I think, I mean, the content that we make, it, which is productivity study related, which is hopefully helping students, helping people to, you know, reach goals and fulfill things that they want to reach and fulfill. I think that in itself, because to me that is important, and so the fact that that lies behind the videos that I put out on YouTube, it's that which gives me the purpose. So less so the actual, putting out of the video, but rather the reason I'm putting it out. So I'd say the crux of purpose lies in having a reason, and some kind of awareness of why you're doing whatever you're doing.
Mm. Yeah, yeah, that's sort of how I think about it as well. Like, I think for me, when I think about sort of the purpose of making the videos, like often I don't think about it in a particularly sort of altruistic slash higher plane. It's more that, okay, well, I've got to put out a video this week, therefore I'm going to put out a video this week, and it's often only when a video performs badly, like 10 out of 10 on the stats, and then I start thinking, okay, no, I don't need to worry about this. Actually, the purpose is important. This is impacting people.
Yeah.
I had like a handful of messages about how my videos change people's lives, and I have to kind of actively remind myself of those bits to feel less bad about the fact that this video is not doing very well on the analytics front.
Yeah.
Whereas if a video is 1 out of 10 on the analytics, I'm like, oh, hey, I'm king of the world. Who cares about purpose? Who cares about the impact of this video? It's 1 out of
Yeah,
10 on the analytics. Yeah.
that is actually so interesting that you say that, because I mean, actively I've been trying to be very aware of, when I'm creating the video, why am I creating this video, how is it going to have a positive impact on people, but when the video does underperform, that's when you go, oh, like actually. No, that's when you remind yourself, and I find myself continuously reminding myself, but remember you made this video with this purpose, and definitely I think that's given me a much healthier relationship with analytics. But when it does come number one, and when it's like soaring off the charts, you're like, oh great, amazing,
Yeah.
and you kind of stop thinking about the purpose of it. So I mean, are the underperforming videos better in that sense? Are they actually the ones that we should be, they're the ones that maybe help us to be better creators, the ones that underperform and that lead us to become more mindful and aware of why we make the videos we do, and thus carry that forward.
Yeah, that's true. But then, like the performance thing it's just so relative as well. Like, especially with this introduction of now kind of ranking your videos in terms of
I hate
views
it.
compared to your last 10 videos, and it's literally impossible to have like 1 out of 10 on everything, because then you're growing at a stupid rate, and
Yeah.
obviously some are going to perform under average because that's what average means. But it's just so demoralizing.
I know, it pits
Yeah.
you against yourself. Like, you're in a
Yeah.
fight against yourself, trying to compete for something that your past you wanted. It's very strange.
Yeah, but it's very much the kind of the first world problems with being a YouTuber.
Literally.
You're like complaining about analytics, like, oh my god.
Like, oh, that annoying 10 out of 10 hierarchy.
One thing I'm curious about is, so you're quite like famous on the internet. To what extent does that kind of bleed into real life?
Obviously, it depends on how much I'm going out, because at the moment it's lockdown. Um, I mean, I would say that, if someone said to me, "You're quote unquote famous," I'll always say, "No, I'm not. You're mistaken." Um, and so, I mean, yes, people recognize me when I go out, but I wouldn't say that. I know it's still very novel. Like, even if like I don't know, like 20 people might come up and say hi in one day, but still every single one is novel. And every single time it's a case of, oh, but that's strange, that somebody would come up and say hi. Not because I don't like, I love it when people do, but just because I don't think of myself as being someone that is known, even though, as considering the followings that we have online, I guess we are. And yeah, I think there's just something very separate sometimes about real life and the content you put out. And I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but you interact with people online, and you talk with people online, and they tell you how your videos have been very helpful for them, and that's wonderful. But then when you see those people in real life, it's kind of somehow completely different, and it seems like it shouldn't be there in real life somehow. I don't know. It's hard to explain. Do you find this?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, like it's so different, the experience of getting a message saying, "Oh my God, your video changed my life," versus someone saying that in real life. It feels like, whoa, it sort of makes it real in a way that the message really doesn't.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'm just always a bit like, yeah, I don't know. It's it's kind of weird though, right? Because it's like on the internet, it's I suppose it's like that thing about kind of caring about people in real life versus caring about statistical
Yeah.
lives. Like on the internet, every viewer is a statistic or a message, or in the chat, people calling you Hermione and calling me Dobby, which seems to be the general vibe in the entire chat. But these are all just like statistical lives, as it were. Um, but then for that to happen in real life, like I'm always baffled whenever, and if anyone in real life says they watch my videos, 'cause I'm like, what, really? Oh, I just thought it was these
Do
sort of
you?
statistical viewers on the internet who watch my videos. Oh, that's so kind of you. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
But
totally.
yeah, it's
But
with
I
the
mean, I don't know, because I mean, at the same time, like, no, actually, I say at the same time, this is just because I don't want to not be mean, but just it seems so bad to say viewers are statistics, because they're not. And like when you talk to someone in the comment section, or someone sends you a really nice message on Instagram, and you're chatting with someone, um, they do become more real. But it's not to the same level as seeing someone in real life. And so I think that there's kind of like almost a it's like a tier-based system of,
yeah
like when you look at the views, then you look at the comments, then you look at the
emails and the
Insta.
DMs and stuff. Yeah,
Yeah, exactly. um yeah, that's a really interesting way of thinking about it. I haven't actively thought about it like that before.
yeah. Like I think about this a lot in the context of just like really kind of honestly asking myself how much do I care about these sorts of comments? And that kind of in the early days, getting an Instagram DM from someone saying, you've changed my life, is like, oh my God, this is incredible. This has made my day.
Screenshotted them and saved them all in a
Yeah,
file.
exactly. But now, like I think I've got like 500 in my kind of file of nice comments, and I just stopped doing it like a year ago. I just haven't really since.
Yeah.
And now, like, it feels so ungrateful, but it's just another example of the hedonic adaptation about like, yeah, change someone's life. All right, like, it doesn't affect me in the slightest unless it's a particularly sort of heart wrenching or novel or sort of like, yeah, it's just, and I don't know,
And
I'm
it sounds so bad. It really does, but I can
yeah, it's not
but
the stuff that you can say out loud and in polite company and be like, yeah,
we're saying
actually,
on live stream here, which maybe is not the best thing. um yeah, no, you're right. And I, like you, I sit there sometimes, and I feel bad about it. I read the comments and I think, oh my gosh, think about every single one of these people as real people, and every single one of them saying, well, not every single one, but a
well,
group of them saying, every
yeah,
single one, saying, you've changed my life for the better. When
yeah,
you think about them as specific single comments, that is amazing. Like you kind of, and you feel so incredibly grateful, but then when you're reading through the comments, like scrolling through them after a video's gone live, they can blur into each other, and that's so bad. And like I hate the way that I don't feel that incredible gratitude for every single one of those comments like I did when I started my channel. And and you really want to, but also you wonder how you can. Like it's interesting you saying about the psychology behind that.
The other thing on a similar vein that I've started thinking about a lot from reading these books about moral psychology and stuff is to what extent for me making videos is actually about like there's a quote from apparently attributed to JP Morgan, which is that a man always has two reasons for doing something. There is the reason he gives, and then there is the real reason. And I think that's very interesting because, you know, when people ask me, you know, why did you do this YouTube thing? There are the good reasons for doing it, which is that, you know, it's fun and it helps people and it's a creative outlet. And then there are the less good reasons for doing it, which is that, you know, it affords me social status and prestige and a decent amount of money and sort of it's nice being famous and all these hidden agendas that's kind of what the title of the book, the elephant in the brain, talks about. It's about how it's kind of like the elephant in the room, that, you know, this thing that's there that no one addresses. The elephant in the brain is all of our selfish motives for doing the things that we do that we as society like systematically don't talk about because it's not fashionable to talk about them, and any ideas we talk about it just makes you look like a complete twat. And so I get really worried when I look back on my videos and think, you know, I made a video about how much money I make on the internet. You know, the good reason for doing that video is to inspire other people to sort of create sources of passive income and become teachers on Skillshare. But you know, how much of that was really me just trying to signal about how much money I've made on the internet? I was like, I was so uneasy about that. Like, yeah.
Because you can have motives without realizing that they're motives, which I think is sometimes quite scary, quite a scary thought. And you are right. Like sometimes I worry about something I've said, thinking like, did I say that because of this, or did I say that because, or like, do I want to say this because of this, or do I want to say this because, you know, some like, because it like in some selfish capacity you think it reflects well on you, and it's something that like I think you have to actively think about sometimes. You're like, why am I actually saying this? And I mean, as a rule of thumb, I try to say like, if I don't think, like, if I think I'm saying it for a reason which is, you know, like utterly selfish, I'll try, like, I won't say it. And I try to like put that filter on so that, yeah, I get, because it's funny, isn't it, how I think that's so ingrained in us.
Yeah, I think about this a lot with like everything I buy. In that I like to think I'm a you know, a connoisseur of tech, and so, you know, when I buy a fancy keyboard, I'm like, yeah, you know, this is going to boost my productivity because I'm a productivity grease monkey, or you know, obviously I need the latest iPhone because, you know, I shoot vlogs occasionally on my phone and I need to have the highest codec and the highest bitrate. But then I wonder, well, you know, given that we're all really status-seeking monkeys, to what extent is this just another example of conspicuous consumption and me wanting to signal, you know, my sort of team membership with Team Apple, or the fact that, hey, check me out, I can afford an iPhone 11 Pro Max. I really worry about that. Like, well, I know I've got good reasons for doing this, and actually, one thought experiment is that if there were no one else in the world, would you still buy the thing? And I think, yeah, I still buy the latest iPhone because I still get decent pics. But I wouldn't necessarily buy a designer handbag for that same reason, because you know, if there were no one else in the world, then I mean, what's the point of a designer handbag? Like, you know, take the logo off it, no one cares. So
yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I actually kind of had something which was I made a video about this actually. I made a video called I'm Not Cool Enough a couple months ago, which was kind of the opposite of that almost, in that I found that when I was at school, because I had this, you know, image of being extremely nerdy, a massive bookworm, you know, we were talking about before, there were certain things where I was like, you know, you can't buy from that shop because you're not cool enough to do that, and in the same way it like becomes something which is so it's exactly the same as like, you know, buying a handbag for the, you know, status symbol of it. When you go ahead and buy something which is incredibly, you know, like when I went ahead and bought like a medical dictionary when I was in year 9, I made a massive deal of like, we need to go out today because I need to buy a medical dictionary, Mum, this is so important. But I mean, I hardly used that medical dictionary. So did I just buy that because for me, like, that helped, that was that kind of like portrays something about yourself, like not even necessarily to the world, but like to yourself. I don't think it's always hugely collective. I think it can be very insular, where you get something, but not because it's going to bring you value or because you actually really like it, but because this is going to help you think a certain way about yourself.
It kind of reinforces the identity to yourself as, I am the sort of person who would buy a medical dictionary. I'm the sort of person
Exactly.
who obviously has the latest Apple Watch and the latest iPhone. It's just
Yes.
like, even if no one else is going to see it, like it's still
It becomes
yeah.
important, which is just as it's such a damaging mindset, and it's like the whole thing with fast fashion as well. It's
Fast fashion.
Yeah.
What's fast fashion?
Fast fashion being like brands like Topshop, H&M, Primark,
Yeah.
where they bring out new clothes every week. So you have like 52 seasons in a year basically, where there are new tops and new jumpers and new dresses every single month. So people have to keep on buying if they're going to stay in fashion and stay cool. And so it just taps into people's need to feel accepted and need to, you know, be following that particular trend, which is it's ingrained in our evolution, in our biology. We want to be part of that, like part of the norm,
Part of the group, part of the team, part of the yeah, all of that.
and it manipulates that, which is it's so damaging. But I think people are becoming more mindful of it now. In I think like a lot on social media and things, like seeing more people thrifting and seeing, yeah.
Yeah, makes sense. So kind of just final few things that I wanted to talk to you about is, to what extent are you sort of to like what sort of proportion of your life are you kind of comfortable sharing in public versus to what extent do you have like a private life that is not part of the kind of Ruby Granger online persona type thing?
Good question. It can be so easy to blur the boundaries, which is so. And I didn't used to have like set boundaries. Now I would say, like I try to be mindful of the fact that I've got my personal life and I've also got YouTube, and because I think if you blur them too much, then your identity kind of becomes skewed, and you can invest too much of your identity into the content that you're creating, which I think is inherently dangerous. I mean, I wouldn't say there are specific things I'm like. It's more that I if I'm seeing friends, it won't be okay. I probably won't really post to social media. I probably won't be vlogging because it it changes dynamics. It changes the kind of the mindset that I'm in, because when you are putting content online, you do have to, on some level, you need to be more conscious of what you're saying, and I mean, like we were saying before about like why you're saying it too, and it's I think it can be very pressurizing in that capacity, and the pressure that it puts, and it like I mean I don't hate that. I think it's fine, but I think you have to be in. I think it's better to be in a certain space when you do that. So if I blur that with being with friends, I find that it becomes I feel less comfortable in the environment I'm in. So just trying to separate it between I'm filming content and now I'm not filming content, even though I wouldn't say my identity changes, but yeah. Do you know what I mean? Like in terms of identity getting distorted in a way.
Yeah, yeah, very much so. I think like it's an interesting conundrum, right? Because in a way, the more kind of authentically you put yourself out there, the more the audience kind of rewards that. Like,
Yeah.
you know, that this video I made recently talking about how much money I earn in a week, like, obviously did really well because it's such a juicy sort of topic that so few people talk about transparently and stuff. And equally any kind of videos that are sort of themed around sex and relationships and sort of like the more personal aspects of life that we would tend to keep to ourselves tend to do really well. And so there becomes this perverse economic incentive to display more of your life online. Yeah. and I feel like in general I have a pretty kind of low bar for what a pretty high bar for what I perceive to be too personal to share online. Like I'm comfortable sharing most things, stuff that I will, one of the few things I actively don't talk about is religion, for example. Sort of that's beyond my line of, I've actively made the decision this is not something I want to go into on the channel. But beyond that, when it comes to like almost anything else, I feel like whatever.
You can talk about it.
It's good content. It's fine. But then kind of I people like my mum would be like, Ali, be very careful about how much you're putting yourself out there. This is not right, etc., etc. And so I always kind of wonder, is there a good, right, like a priori reason to not put certain aspects of things out there? Yeah, it's something I think about a fair deal.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that I really actively am aware of not putting out is, I mean, I try to talk about mental health. I think that's important to talk about, to be open and like to contribute to that discussion. So I will talk about mental health, but I make a very conscious decision to of thinking, at what point does, because as soon as you put something online, you open yourself up for criticism, and you allow people to comment on that, and you allow people to, it's like going out into the public domain, something that could be very, very sensitive for you. So if I'm going to speak about anything relating to mental health, I have to think, is when I put this out, am I comfortable with people commenting on this? Am I comfortable with people forming an opinion on this? And is it going to damage my mental health by actually talking about this openly? So it kind of becomes a space of weighing it up, if because if it's going to have like a really positive impact and like actually really help people, then you want to put it up. But also, I think you have to keep your own mental health in perspective too.
Yeah, definitely. I need to have a think about that more. Anyway, the final thing I want to talk to you about is your pumpkin productivity. What is that, and how did it get started? Kind of changing gears a little bit.
Yeah, completely different. Let me just quickly. Okay, so I sell study planners. This is a pumpkin productivity product. So I started it back in 2017. So how many subscribers did I have then? I hate that I'm using that as a benchmark.
Yeah, I've started doing that as well. As like, oh yeah, back in the 50k days, that thing happened rather than time. It becomes subscriber count.
It's so weird, isn't it? Oh, yeah. But I think it's funny how we remember it as well. Like how many subscribers you have at any one time. Yeah. Like if you give me a midway through 2018, I'd be able to tell you around how many subscribers I had at that point, which is actually kind of bad. I don't know, is that a bad thing?
Well, it's like the stat that sees you anytime you log into YouTube. It's like, oh, how much have we got up by? And now they started doing that thing where they tell you about, your 28-day rolling subscriber count and how low it is compared to what it was the previous 28 days. You're like, damn, it's beginning of the end.
10%. So this was back when I had like 30 or 40,000 subscribers. So not like before it really started to grow. And I'd always dreamt about making stationery, like.
Oh, nice! Me too. That's like a dream of mine, to have my own stationery brand, which is why I'm asking you all these questions.
And I can't wait for it to come out because obviously I'm going to be the first customer.
Nice.
So I make my own study planners every day. I'd batch make them, then I'd photocopy them, and then I'd use them for every single study session I did, and I found them so helpful. Like I figured out this system where it was like the perfect system for me, and I used it every day, and it never failed me. And so I just thought, why don't I actually properly design this into something which isn't just like me handwriting it and then photocopying it and thinking it looked all professional, when actually it was just like written on a piece of A4 paper. But so I, designed it digitally, and then my dad had a friend who owned like a printing press. So I spoke to him and I said, I really want to print these study planners. Do you think you'd be able to help me? And he said, yeah, that's absolutely fine. So basically it started like that. It was so, it kind of wasn't that complicated, really. But I think I am glad that I started it then without really, because it was kind of a spur of the moment decision almost. Within a week of me designing them, they were printed.
Oh, wow. Okay, that's pretty good.
Which is very quick, like very quick. I mean, considering this has been like 3 years in the making of making this like perfect study planner that I used every day myself, but I'm glad that I did that because there's this wonderful quote. I think it's by Roosevelt, which says, "If your first try is perfect, then you waited too long." And it would have been so easy for me to sit there and think, I'm going to keep on, trialing it. I'm going to keep on trialing it, but I don't know that I ever would have released anything if I hadn't done that. But yeah, so I released that first product, and then like a year later, I started making some more different planners to put up too. Yeah, I mean, it's literally, it's like such a boring story, really. But it was just that I had a study planner that I thought people might like, and people always ask me, how do you plan your study sessions? So I condensed that down into literally like, this is how I plan for my study sessions. You'd be planning in the exact same way if you use the study planner. So yeah, basically.
Yeah, I think your point about like speed of execution is such an important one. Like, I think if there's one thing that almost guarantees success, is just sort of executing very, very quickly. Like, I remember when I started, I started this business in med school that helps people get into medicine, as everyone does. But it's like, I had the idea, and then sort of within a week, we had the website up and taking bookings and started creating the material and stuff. And I think equally with the YouTube channel, when I was like, oh, okay, I need to start doing this vlog thing. I was like, okay, speed of execution. I also got my phone out and sort of filmed a vlog that evening, being like, right, guys, I'm starting a YouTube channel, and edited and uploaded it that same evening. And I think just having that bias towards sort of executing very, very fast on whatever just makes everything just so much easier and better, because then, as you said, you get stuck in this perfectionism that, I don't want to release a YouTube video unless I know it's good enough, and then you're never going to start a YouTube channel.
Yeah, like literally, I can't agree with you more. I think it's the most important thing you can do whenever you're going to do anything. Because it kind of, I mean, I always like to think of motivation as kind of an activation energy that you've got to reach in order to do whatever it is that you want to do. And I really do think that the longer you leave something, the more that activation energy rises, and so you've got a bigger peak to jump over if you're going to get started. Because the reason you put it off is, I want to wait till it's perfect, but then obviously it has to become more and more and more perfect the longer you leave it, to justify you leaving it so long. But if you just release it that day, if you release that YouTube video the first day you think of releasing it, then you don't have time for that activation energy to get high, as it were.
Yeah, and I think kind of on the same metaphor of activation energy, it's like when you first have an idea, you have that initial drive, or like, oh yeah, this is cool, I'm going to start doing it. But like, the more you mull it over in your mind, the more be like, oh, okay, I mean, I've kind of done the fun bit of thinking about it. Now I just have to do the actual work, and like, CBA with that. Like, who cares about doing the actual work?
Yeah, it's like it's becoming less and less effective, and it's not going to get you over that over the activation energy.
Absolutely. So, final question that we have from the gram, which I think is a nice place to end this. What's the most important lesson you've each learnt since starting YouTube? Do you wanna go first? Because I then it gives me time to think of mine.
Okay, that was
most important lesson that you've learnt since starting YouTube.
I don't want it to be too cheesy, but also cheesy life lessons are kind of my favorites. So
Mate,
I'm
go
going
for it. Cheesy is good. They say that the secrets to life are hidden behind the word cliche.
Ooh, I like that.
Yeah.
Really like that. So the main thing I've learned through doing YouTube is that there is nothing more effective and fulfilling than, quote unquote, being yourself, and acting in the way that you would most like to act, because at least what I found is I as we've spoken about before, you know, in terms of like being nerdy at school, I always felt very different at school, and very like kind of isolated from other people because my interests were so different. Whereas on YouTube, it became a space where there is always going to be someone somewhere who relates with that on some level, and so I think it just kind of having a YouTube channel and doing YouTube really showed me and really emphasized to me the importance of being myself.
Damn, that's so wholesome. My example is so not wholesome at all. Oh goodness. Oh well, that was a very nice answer. I think the chat is loving it as we speak. I would say one of the biggest lessons that I've learned from YouTube is just that, and this is so very unwholesome, but that when we have short feedback loops in the things that we're doing, it's very, very satisfying. It's like the reason I struggle to go to the gym regularly is because the feedback loop is just way too long. It's like if I did a bicep curl and immediately got more hench, I'd be going to the gym all the time. And that's why kind of losing weight is so hard, because it's like, you know, you don't go through McDonald's drive-through and you haven't suddenly got a six-pack. It's like, what the hell? What's going on here? But one of the very satisfying things about YouTube is that the instant you put out a video, you're getting that feedback loop going and you're getting that growth going. And that is just so satisfying. And so I kind of realized that. And now I think about sort of manufacturing these feedback loops in anything else that I'm trying to do, anything I'm trying to learn. That if there's a way of turning it into a game where the numbers are going up, even when it comes to like studying, you know, it's sort of color coding the timetable, be like, oh, every day I'm learning a little bit more. Just like shortening that feedback loop rather than it being kind of that exam in 2 years' time is my kind of feedback loop.
I love that.
That just makes it
oh my gosh,
more doable.
Your life lesson has literally turned into something that you can put straight back into a video of like, this is what you need.
Yes.
The thing I've learned from YouTube is this, and you don't have to study YouTube to learn it yourself.
Mate, I could just like copy and paste this segment from the live chat and turn it into a video. Yes. Oh, mate, you're a genius. Okay, so my takeaways for kind of the notes I've made on this to-do list. So 30-day morning routines and the bucket list of morning routines. And I'm going to read Great Expectations and The Miracle Morning. And then I'm going to make a video about my morning routine. Just you wait and see.
Oh, I can't remember it. I've got some really good recommendations here, like The Life You Can Save by Peter Singer. The Flat Share looks really good. Like, that book sounds really good.
Oh, mate, it's so good.
It sounds very readable, you know? The kind of thing that you can't put down. Compelling.
Yeah.
And then the app, was it called Roam, right?
Roam, as in ROAM, Roam Research.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, you should check out Roam Research. It's pretty good. And actually, guys, on the Notion page, which is linked in the video description, we have links to all of the different books. How many books have we mentioned? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, in addition to all of the classics that you mentioned. The Motivation, Myth, The Drive, Miracle Morning, Elephant in the Brain, Righteous Mind, Anything You Want, The Life You Can Save, Normal People, and The Flat Share. Sick.
Perfect.
This has been a good chat. Thank you very much for joining all of us on the channel, Ruby. Is there any kind of final ask or anything you'd like to plug to the audience before we go? Apart from the planners.
No, I don't think so. Just I just hope you're having a good day. Let's say that.
So wholesome. My goodness. All right. I think you're the most wholesome guest we've ever had on the channel. So thank you very much for joining. Thank you everyone for tuning in, and we will see you at some point soon. Bye-bye. Okay, I think we